Hello my dear friends, and welcome to another episode of Europa Rediviva. Today I'd like to talk about some political developments in Romania and about the concept of pro-European. What does it mean to be pro-European? So the waters in Romanian politics have become so murky that now even the pro-Europeans themselves accuse each other of being anti-European or not pro-European, whatever that means. And I wanted to do a bit of an analysis on the origins of this concept. It appeared around the time of the start of the war in Ukraine, because before that the split in society was between the people who are educated and who know science and who of course take the experimental genetic vaccines, and those who are uneducated and don't know science and don't have faith in science, as the propaganda used to put it, and that do not take the experimental genetic vaccines. And ever since the war in Ukraine started in 2022, the shift, the demonization from the official propaganda apparatus moved to demonizing the anti-Europeans, or those that are not pro-European. In Romania, because the end of the pandemic, the end of the state of alert, as it was called, caught me in Romania, this shift was very visible, and it was very clear how one cause supplanted the other, because during the so-called state of alert, which ended in March 2022, so 1 month after the beginning of the war in Ukraine, the unvaccinated, meaning me and, half of Romania, were barred from public places. We could not go to restaurants, we could not go to institutions of culture like libraries, but we could also not go to official state institutions. We could not access citizenship services unless we had the green certificate. So the society was completely segregated. It was funny because the then mayor of Bucharest, now president of Romania, was not vaccinated, and he did not have a green certificate to enter the governmental building when he was summoned for various things. And in that month that passed from the beginning of the war in Ukraine until the end of the state of alert in Romania, there was this crazy situation in which the Romanian unvaccinated people were barred from public places, but the Ukrainian unvaccinated people were allowed on the basis of the Ukrainian passport. So a Romanian citizen was not allowed to enter malls, to enter restaurants, to enter public institutions without showing the green certificate, but the Ukrainian citizen could show to the same guards that were demanding the green certificate, could show their Ukrainian passport. And so the Ukrainian passport supplanted the Romanian passport on the territory of Romania. You received more rights in February-March 2022 as a Ukrainian passport holder than you did as a Romanian passport holder on the territory of Romania, because the Romanian citizens had to prove that they were either vaccinated or tested or had a positive test result in the last 60 days, whereas the Ukrainians could wander around society completely unvaccinated and could just show the Ukrainian passport, and it was enough to gain access to all the places that Romanians did not have access to. So this is how one cause supplanted the other, and these measures that were taken against the unvaccinated were supplanted by measures taken against the so-called anti-Europeans. So this idea of Brussels consensus slowly emerged, that the European countries must be on the side of Ukraine and must help Ukraine wage this proxy war of NATO against Russia. And for some of these European countries, this meant extraordinary cost that they were not willing to bear. For France and Germany, this meant well, for France, this meant an imperial ambition, a proxy war that they could just carry out without severe consequences in their economy, because they have an extensive nuclear sector and they can bear the costs of higher energy, and they were not exactly dependent of Russian oil. For Germany, Germans were harder to goad into this plan. So for Germans, because their economy depended on imports of Russian oil and gas, it was hard to get them on board, but in the end it was manageable. So they got on board as well. And then you had these economies in Eastern Europe, like Slovakia, like Hungary, like Serbia, which is not in the European Union, but it is in the same situation, like Bulgaria, that depend fully on Russian hydrocarbons, on Russian oil and gas imports. And of course, these economies could not sanction their own energy inputs. So this narrative was concocted in Brussels that whoever opposes the, let's say, Franco-German consensus of leading this proxy war against Russia to the detriment of the European countries is anti-European. Nobody really explained what anti-European means, but they just pointed out examples. Viktor Orban is anti-European, Robert Fico is anti-European, and of course the sovereigntists in various countries are anti-European because they oppose the European idea, the Brussels consensus, that Europe should sacrifice itself on the altar of American geopolitical ambitions of waging this proxy war against Russia. If France and Germany thought that they had something to gain for their corporations, the countries of Eastern Europe knew that they had nothing to gain from this war, and they still know this. But through this kind of information warfare, public opinion in these countries was engineered in such a way that they finally obtained a victory in Hungary. So through sanctions, through all sorts of information operations, the Brussels establishment obtained an electoral victory in Hungary, and they managed to supplant Viktor Orban and to replace him with Peter Magyar, who is allegedly a more cooperative player. And in Romania itself, this divide was created, or actually it was extended from the vaccine crusade times, that whoever opposes these measures that are not exactly rational and they're not exactly beneficial to the majority of the society is somehow anti-European. Of course, no explanation was given, just some figures, some political actors and some civil society activists were labeled as being anti-European or being against the pro-European consensus. And this is all it took. And I thought it was a pretty retarded thing to do, because it's hard to argue that your coalition made out of the establishment parties, so the European People's Party, the European Socialists, Renew Europe, and the Greens, would be somehow European, whereas the political parties that contest, that are the opposition in Brussels, and that contest the Commission of Ursula von der Leyen would be somehow anti-European. I thought we were all European to begin with, so I thought it's hard to describe half of your society. It's hard to describe the opposition as being against the continent, against European civilization and so on, especially because no other let's say place of allegiance was indicated in their case. So if they're not pro-European, they're pro-what? They're pro-African, they're pro-Asian. It doesn't make much sense, but it caught on, surprisingly. So now, after 4 years of this delusion that half of the population is pro-European and the other half is anti-European, now we have a split in the pro-European camp. And some, pro-European orthodoxists accuse the pro-European heterodoxists of being anti-European. It's like the purges in totalitarian societies. It's like, the Stalinist purges of the 1930s, or the SA purge done by Hitler and the SS. the people who hold power have started to purge each other, and using, of course, the methods of politicized criminal justice, as I've explained in previous episodes, to carry this out. So yesterday there were several court rulings that are favorable to the president of Romania and to his proposed government. And coincidentally, they all came in the same day, and they all targeted important people in the parties that oppose him, and also some internal decisions of one of the parties were reversed in a snap decision issued by a court of law in a few hours from its submission. So it's hard to consider these coincidences, and it's hard to see them as anything else but political involvement in the justice system. But this is how it always was. So actually in Romania there are very few people who want the justice system to be politically neutral. Maybe just some technicians from inside the system, some people who cherish law for what it is, who understand the notion of the separation of powers. But in practice, the criminal justice system was used ever since 2005, ever since the magistrates came under political control instead of having their careers managed by the Magistrates' Council, the Superior Magistrates' Council. So ever since 2005, the public prosecutor and the judges, through this co-opting mechanism done by the intelligence services, were aligned with the political power, even though the judicial power should be independent from the political power. In practice, for more than 20 years now, the justice system has been functioning at the behest of the political power. And this led to situations such as these. So 10 years ago, the name of the game was to strip the political class clean of any domestic elements, so of any domestic agents, of any agents of national interest, and to do the same with the economy. So the justice system was functioning at the behest of the foreign corporations operating in Romania, to basically put in jail and to take over the businesses of any Romanian entrepreneurs, and to prosecute and to send to prison any kind of politician that would invoke national interest. And now it is a tool in the hands of the same pro-Europeans, but of course it is the president of the country that holds the greatest power, because he can appoint the heads of the secret services, and the heads of the secret services have successfully co-opted the courts through secret protocols, and essentially the justice system functions at the behest of the president of Romania ever since 2005, more or less. So Romania is essentially this perpetual dictatorship. It is now in the third iteration, where you have somebody who is clearly a foreign agent taking power, ruling the country with the help of the justice system, and assembling his own government using a blackmailed political majority. And he also secures his re-election through the co-opting of the media and of the so-called civil society, using the same tools and, well, those of his foreign paymaster. Even though afterwards everybody comes to the conclusion that he was an awful president. And yet they not only elected him the first time, but they also successfully re-elected him, and maybe even stopped attempts to remove him from office through the suspension procedure. And it will be the same now. So Nicu Șordan took office in 2025. His term expires in 2030. Just like I tried to sabotage Klaus Iohannis' re-election in 2019, asking him a question during his pseudo-debate with his cronies from the media. I tried to ask him an inconvenient question, and somehow this was appreciated at the time, even though those voices from the civil society that appreciated my question still voted for Klaus Johannes' re-election and still supported him to get a second term. And now, of course, they unanimously think he was a horrible president and somebody that has nothing to do with public life. So he was completely disinterested in anything except his own power, and this is why he will not be remembered by history. He's not even active in public life because he has nothing to say. And the same will happen to the current president. I also tried to warn people around me. I did not go publicly because there was no point. I mean, everything that I knew about him was also in the public domain. There was no information that I had on him that was not publicly known to anybody else. So the fact that his mind is, let's say, confused, to say the least, was known in the public space at least since 2016, when his party entered parliament. And I tried to tell people that he's not exactly fit for public office, but I did not have any success even with the people around me. So then what could I have hoped for going public? But, well, people have what they voted for. There was this public hysteria to get him elected. Even in the first round, there were several candidates that were more suitable to become president, or at least to enter the second round. But the Romanians chose him, and then they voted for him in a landslide with record turnout. And now part of his supporters are accusing him of being anti-European, whatever that means. So he was not criticized from Brussels, but he's criticized domestically as being affiliated with MAGA. Even though Nicu Șordan was not received by Trump, and the Romanian presidential office is paying 500,000 euros per month, or 5 million, I don't remember exactly. Maybe 5 million still, 500,000 would have been peanuts. $5 million per month for lobbying activities in the United States in order to secure some sort of state visit or a handshake. Or so far, Donald Trump shook hands with him in passing twice, and when he addressed him in the so-called Peace Council, he called him Prime Minister. So obviously the American administration is not very interested in Romania and in the Romanian president, and somehow the Romanian presidency wants to revert that with well, you could call it lobbying, others might call it corruption. So basically bribing their way into some sort of photo opportunity at the White House. So yeah, the people who voted for Nicu Șordan are somehow disappointed, even though that disappointment will not stop them from re-electing him in 2030. I can see the headlines already that he is the pro-European choice, that he's the pro-Western choice, and that he's the only chance that we have so that we do not fall into the clutches of Russia. And in 2030 there will be this mass hysteria again, where the fascists are coming and do anything to elect Nicu Șor and bring the students out on the streets to protest and to try some sort of putsch in case Nicu Șor is not elected, try some sort of color revolution. And well, I've seen the movie before. I've been seeing it for 20 years, but somehow the Romanians are still in it, and they cannot get themselves to vote differently and to get themselves out from this Groundhog Day. If you've seen the movie, it's the same old loop in which the Romanians are caught. The cliche 5 years ago was 7 years ago, when Klaus Johannes was re-elected, was that the opposition meant corruption, and 11 years ago as well, 12 years ago, his opponent stood for corruption, whereas he stood for justice and a clean institutional system, whatever that means. And now it will be to save us from the Russians. So last year the Romanians voted en masse for the pro-Western, anti-Russian solution, and they will do the same in 2030. It will be the same game, and whoever contests this, whoever says that actually being pro-European or pro-Western means something else, will be labeled a Putin puppet and a Putin apologist and so on. In my case, it's funny that I'm labeled, I routinely get labeled anti-European and anti-Western, even though I've emigrated to the West the first time, I've emigrated to the West the second time, and I'm a citizen of another Western European country. And for me, the West, well, I mean, Europe, because America is a completely different ball game, but continental Europe for me meant social services. For me it meant inclusion, economic inclusion. For me it meant having access to quality healthcare, quality education, quality every kind of public service you can imagine, and to have a society run for the people, not have a society milked for foreign corporations. I've explained this in previous episodes. For me, being pro-European is having public services in public hands, so having utilities nationalized. But in Romania, such speech would be regarded as pro-Russian or being pro-communist or fascist or something like this. There's the left-wing guard of pseudo-intellectuals that receive money from the US Embassy, who would label anybody who has this discourse of nationalizations as being fascist, because he wants Romanian ownership, and wanting something for the Romanians is nationalistic and therefore fascist. And this is the purpose that they serve. This is why they receive the money from the US Embassy. They need to be the guards of any kind of pro-domestic solution, of any kind of against any kind of decolonization. So yeah, for me, being pro-European meant to emulate solutions that I found in the Dutch society, for example, where I lived for 10 years. And this is why I also joined these what are now called the pro-European parties 10 years ago. When I came back from the Netherlands, when I settled to Romania, because I had this question from a viewer, and I decided to address it in a video comment rather than in writing. For me, I thought that the solution that our generation should bring to Romania was this, perhaps the same type of solution that the people from the 1848 revolution brought, so some sort of emulation of France. In my case, it was just the emulation of the West. But this did not mean to put the country at the behest of the interests of those Western countries and their corporations, because France doesn't want Romania to look like France. France wants Romania to give as much money to French corporations. Germany doesn't want Romania to look like Germany. Germany wants Romania to give as much money to German corporations. Like you have these procurement contracts with Rheinmetall and so on. So for me, I thought that this political class that wants to emulate the West doesn't just want to become agents at the behest of these Western economic interests, but actually wants to improve the lifestyle of the people to the level of the West. This was my idea. So to have public services functioning at the level of the Western European countries, this was for me what pro-Western meant or pro-European meant. And of course to have domestic capital function at the level of the domestic capital in France and in Germany. Those corporations that dominate the French and the German industries are domestic. They're not foreign, as in the case of Romania. So for me, the pro-European solution would have meant to bring Romanian society, to bring the Romanian population, to bring even the Romanian industry, even Romanian domestic capital, to bring them to the level of the Western Europeans, not to have them exploited by the Western European corporations. I know it doesn't sound like rocket science, but somehow it's beyond the level of the discourse in Romania. In Romania, if you talk about being exploited by Western corporations, you are immediately labeled a Russian asset, because only because only Russia would be favored by such a speech. This would be a Russian narrative, the fact that Romania is being exploited by foreign corporations, even though it's a factual piece of evidence. It's something that is not disputable. But yeah, we are stuck in the world of words. We are stuck in these cliches of whoever follows exactly what Ursula von der Leyen wants is pro-European, and who has doubts is anti-European. And unfortunately, just like in any totalitarian movement, these people will end up purging each other. Even in the case of the European Commission, we see now that there's this conflict between Ursula von der Leyen and Kaja Kallas. And Kaja Kallas might go because she made some true but problematic remarks regarding Israel, regarding the nature of Israel as a pariah state in the international system, and liking it to South Africa under apartheid, when society was basically ruled by a white minority, and the grand majority of the inhabitants of the land were put in segregated zones. And so even the Brussels establishment is having difficulties maintaining one line, because this is what happens when you lose, when you're on the losing side in a war. As they say, victory has many fathers, defeat has none. Nobody wants to accept defeat. However, when one side of a geopolitical confrontation is defeated, everybody looks for scapegoats. So as the pro-European party is not exactly faring very well, they have to purge each other, and they are doing it in Brussels. And of course, this is also emulated in these satellite countries, and Romania is an important battleground in this internal purge of the pro-European camp. Also, some people have asked me if I see some solutions, some optimistic takes, some remarks of how things could be improved. Sorry, but I don't, in the case of Romania. So, in the case of Bulgaria, for example, they managed to escape this perpetual crisis in which they were, this perpetual political crisis. After several rounds of elections and several provisional governments, somebody with credibility from the sovereigntist side, but which also had ties with the Socialist Party, managed to come and unite the political spectrum, the sovereigntist political spectrum, and to win an absolute majority in parliament. I don't think such a person exists in Romania. Maybe the closest one would be Victor Ponta. I know he has his failings, I know he's not exactly trustable, but because there was this massive purge of the political elite, and I can think of people like, I don't know, Adrian Năstase, Varujan Vosganian. There are all sorts of people who understood the economy, understood society, were well educated, had general knowledge, and yeah, from that generation of politicians, only Victor Ponta escaped the lawfare process. After 10 years of court battles, he was finally acquitted, and now he's a member of parliament, even though he's not a member of any political party, and he's not a member of a prominent prominent parliamentary group. He's the only one that is marginally competent and that kind of has an understanding of the world we're living in. But I don't see him gaining more than 50% of the votes in case we have early elections, as the Bulgarians managed to do with Rumen Radev. The Bulgarians also had stronger sovereigntist parties. So in the case of Bulgaria, the equivalent of AUR, this kind of MAGA party that is affiliated with ECR. In Bulgaria it was ITN, and it was rather marginal. It was so harmless that it was even co-opted into the pro-European coalition, and finally did not make the parliamentary threshold. And the sovereigntist parties that were prominent and that still are way more radical. They're against the United States, they're against Israel, they're against NATO, they're against the European Union establishment. And from this kind of environment, Rumen Radev could capitalize. His last campaign event featured a photo with him and Putin, so he managed to galvanize a different kind of public, a different kind of political audience in Bulgaria. And he also had the credibility of being a NATO-trained Air Force officer, a general. So he could stay in politics without being a target of lawfare for being too close to Russia. So the Americans did not build such lawfare mechanisms in Bulgaria as they built in Romania. And even if they had, he would have still had the proper NATO credentials, having done some military training in the United States and so on. So he would have escaped under the radar, and he would have also been palatable to the pro-European, pro-American, pro-Western camp, as it turned out to be. In Romania, I do not see such a solution. Plus, our constitution is pretty feeble. We cannot have early elections unless the president really wants this to happen. He's not bound by the constitution to dissolve parliament, irrespective of how many times his proposals of prime ministers fail. So we could be in this exercise of futility for years to come, with Nicu Șodan appointing, his relatives or whoever, his neighbors, as prime ministers, and those proposals would fail, and he would come with a new one, and so on and so forth. So we would be in this Groundhog Day type of scenario without end. This is what I wanted to tell you today. If you like what I do, like, share, subscribe, and if you want to support me financially, you'll find a link in the channel description how to do so. And until next time, take care.